Good afternoon, friends. My name is Vinay Kumar. I represent Press Club of India as Secretary General here this afternoon. And we have launched this series in collaboration with IIC, PCI Conversation with Media series. We have had three talks under this series. First was by Ashish Da in Press Club. Second was by Mr. Ashok Vajpayee, which was held in IIC. And third one was by Mr. Jagdeep Chokra, which was held in Press Club of India. So we do it alternately every month, and we try to bring in some topics where journalists and members of intelligentsia alike are forced to think and ponder over these relevant issues. So today's topic you all have got on the mails and messages. I'll introduce the speaker and then Suhas will carry. Irfan Habib has worked in the area of history of science as well as political history. After teaching history for a few years, he joined the National Institute of Science, Technology and Development Studies, New Delhi. He spent more than 30 years looking at the intellectual and institutional foundations of modern science and technology during the colonial phase in India. Within this framework, he began by investigating the role of dissemination of modern science through the local Indian languages, and how a language like Urdu could transform itself from a language of poetry to a language skilled in communicating modern science. He later moved to the questions of interface between local Indian knowledge traditions and modern knowledge which came along with colonization. In his more recent work, he has raised some fundamental questions centering around diversities of knowledge and cultural practices in India and elsewhere around the world. Besides a large number of papers, he has also co-edited and authored with Dhruv Raina several books, including Situating the History of Science, Dialogues with Joseph Needham, and Social History of Science in Colonial India. He has also co-authored Domesticating Modern Science in Colonial India. His book, To Make the Deaf Hear, Ideology and Program of Bhagat Singh and His Comrades, has been translated into several Indian languages like Hindi, Tamil, Malayalam, Punjabi, and Bengali. His other book is Jihad, or is just orthodoxy and modern Islam. He recently put together a volume on Indian nationalism, The Essential Writings, and another one called Inquilab, Bhagat Singh on Religion and Revolution. He has also coordinated the South and Southeast Asian section of History of Science in UNESCO's prestigious History of Humanity series. Till recently, he held Maulana Azad Chair at the National University of Educational Planning and Administration, New Delhi. His forthcoming book is a biography of Maulana Abul Kalam Azad that focuses on his understanding of Islam and also nationalism. Besides being a Fulbright scholar, he has been a visiting professor at several universities like Humboldt University Berlin, University of Cambridge, University of Kolkata, State University of New York, Maison des Sciences Paris, MIT Cambridge, Mass, and others. And to moderate the series, we have Mr. Suhas Borker, who is a well-known journalist who launched Jan Prasar and Citizens First Television. He has traveled with many personalities abroad, interviewed Nelson Mandela and whatnot. Suhas, today being the Constitution Day as well as National Law Day, so we chose this relevance of values of freedom struggle, and to carry on further, Mr. Borker.
Thank you, Vinay. Now, this is a unique thing. This is the first time that a member both of the Press Club of India and the IIC will be speaking. So Irfan is a member both of Press Club and the IIC. So we all three now have this commonality. All three are members of both the institutions. Irfan has done, seminal work on Bhagat Singh. So that, of course, will figure in today's discussion. And then we will all, I discussed with Irfan before, he will be touching on Subhash Bose and Maulana Azad. Now, there's an interesting fact which I want to share with you, that the Italian philosopher Antonio Gramsci, who gave much thought to the role of intellectuals in society, and was imprisoned by Mussolini's fascist regime, was born exactly 73 years before, in 1891. The same day, IIC was founded in 1962, 22nd of January. Now, the other thing which I just want to flag is, which we have discussed, Ashish Da also pointed this out, that democracy develops deep roots in countries with strong civil society institutions. So we regard the India International Center as a civil society institution. Now, if we could start, you see the misuse of the past for the promotion of the present political fortunes is now rampant in our country. Now, how do you see this process?
Good afternoon. Thank you for this invitation to ask and Vinay. Now, when we discussed about the lecture, I was in the middle of responding to some very detailed queries about.
They cannot hear you, I think.
They can.
Is it okay?
Yes.
So till yesterday, 4 o'clock, I was responding to all those queries which were about the book Omar Azad. And before that, when Suhas called me on phone and we wanted to decide about the subject to speak, and he was keen that we should talk about freedom struggle. I said, okay, name anything, but I will surely talk about the relevance of what the legacy of freedom struggle. And I will try to speak through 4 or 5 individuals, because we don't have that sort of detailed time, and especially about those who are talked about or misrepresented rather in their views and ideas every other day during the past few years. So what exactly they stood for, why we don't talk about their ideology, their position, their legacy, their values they stood for, and why only partial celebration takes place regarding most of them. So today, as Suhas said, is an important day, a constitution day. It's an important for a democracy like India, and the most serious challenge to the values or to the inheritance of independence or freedom struggle comes from the government today, which we all know. Most of us keep discussing that all the time. The very foundation of the constitution, which we are celebrating today, which was a product of the values of freedom struggle, the core values of constitutional principles of justice, equality, liberty, and fraternity. All of them were incorporated into the constitution after a serious deliberations during 70-80 years of freedom struggle. In short, an attempt is being made to subvert the values of freedom struggle. After 7 decades of independence, the history of our freedom movement appears a distant past for most Indians, and a political dispensation is using that disjunction to the hilt, to the best of their ability, to mount a concerted attack on the history and legacy of the freedom movement. Today's generation, because the young people, they are not even familiar with the emergency which we talk about, which has become history for most of the people, and so forget about the past. So many people have no time, and we don't expect many people to even read what is written in the books. Most of the understanding of the past is through WhatsApp, is through media, is through internet, which is many times, most of the times, very, very wrongly interpreted and very questionable. So in that context, one has to keep in mind, and this is actually for the first time, habit of reading. I generally speak without any support. But I thought we should talk about people about whom I have decided to talk about through them. Because mostly when I go to speak on Bhagat Singh, which I've been doing for 40 years, people generally say it is a Marxist interpretation of a scholar. Bhagat Singh stood for something else. And my answer to all such questions is, don't read what I have written. Go and read what Bhagat Singh has written. What he said about everything which I have been talking to you. Because these are people like Bhagat Singh, like Subhash Chandra Bose, or Maulana Azad, or Jawaharlal Nehru. All of them were intellectuals who left behind an intellectual legacy. They were not like for example, Sardar Patel, who was a man of action, who didn't write much, except for correspondence, etc. He spoke a lot, but he didn't really left behind tombs of writings, which we can go through and understand him. But these 4-5 people wrote tremendously, and so for them to understand these people is not very difficult if we care to read what they wrote. So I thought, let me begin by presenting before you their ideas and the words they used to express most of the things which the challenges we are facing today. And we need to understand, did the freedom movement give us any warnings about the shape of things to come, what is happening today? Yes, indeed. And the example is Bhagat Singh. There was Bhagat Singh who warned us that freedom must mean a complete rupture with colonial governance and the class rule of landlords and capitalists. Else, freedom would degenerate into a transition from white English rule to takeover by the Brown Sahib's successors. And this is something, this is just one sentence. Bhagat Singh repeatedly talks about this in all his writings, in all his court statements, in his manifestos, and in the manifesto of the Naujawan Bharat Sabha. And anything he wrote, he referred to this also a distinct disjunction again and again. There was a warning from Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, whom we need to invoke today on the Constitution Day, who pointed out to the inherent tension between formal political equality and underlying social and economic inequality. The threat of a cult which can trap democracy and cage it into a dictatorial rule. So he referred to this, that democracy can be caged, democracy can be subverted, so that those threats Ambedkar, while drafting the constitution, could explain and could speak about repeatedly. Now, when we talk about these people, now let me begin by Bhagat Singh, or Bose, maybe. Now, generally, when we talk about Subhash Chandra Bose, and this is a trend which is a very acceptable trend, that Subhash Chandra Bose is INA, and we just don't talk about anything else. As if Subhash Chandra Bose was actually descended into that year when INA was founded, and he had no past, which is very seriously questionable. Because Subhash Chandra Bose had the whole 1920s and 1930s, these 2 decades, which were spent in writing, mobilizing the youth, along with Jawaharlal Nehru, alone as well, speaking. Well, he did extremely serious work in terms of intellectual inputs, which is all part of our legacy, which we don't care to talk about. Now, in the past 7-8 years particularly, I am watching, you are also listening, that Subhash Chandra Bose is celebrated as a great INA founder, general, who actually questioned or challenged the British. might, which he did, nobody can question that. But we should not actually begin and end with INA. That is not Subhash Chandra Bose, that is complete celebration of the man. Now we need to celebrate him for what he wrote, and that's what I want to share with you, because all those things which he said in those times are a serious challenge today. They are all being subverted, they are all being forgotten, they are all being undervalued. We don't even remember to talk about them. If we talk about them very pejoratively for most of those issues, which I will just raise before you. Subhash Bose is venerated as a romantic revolutionary with a mystique attached to his persona. However, not much is discussed or debated, as I said, about his idea of India. His unequivocal antipathy towards divisive politics during freedom struggle, his inclusive nationalism and dislike for communalism is reflected in most of his writings and utterances. Bose was categorical when he said that communalism will go only when the communal mentality goes. Now, this is something which we need to remember in today's India. To destroy communalism is, therefore, the task of all those Indians, which includes Muslims, Sikhs, Christians, and Hindus, who have transcended the communal outlook and have developed a genuine nationalist mentality. So for him to develop a serious nationalist mentality, you need to be non-communal. So he defines very clearly, if you are communal, you are not nationalist, because you are dividing the country into two or into four, into Hindus, Muslims, Christians, and Sikhs. So for him, anyone who looks India in a way which is composite, which includes everyone, is actually a true nationalist. So this is what Bose says in 1920s. So we need to understand what Bose actually imagined about India, about the future of India. So it was not just merely INA. Then there is another very interesting thing about Bose, which we normally don't even talk about, read about, and this is something actually the most important in his life, in his political career, if we see. His long, detailed presidential address in Haripura in 1938. And we need to remember the date, 1938. 1938 means he was almost at the end of his career in the Congress. He was about to leave in a year and a half, leave India and get into INA mode. In 1938, and this address I think everyone should read who have not read it, and I've just picked a few things from there. He says, I know that there are friends who think, and I'm saying this because we hear this again and again, that Gandhi wanted the Congress party to be wound up. And when I say Congress party, don't think about today's Congress party. I'm talking about 1930s, before independence. So that Congress party had a very different role or perspective or position. I know that there are friends who think that after freedom is won, the Congress party, having achieved the objective, should wither away. Such a conception is entirely erroneous. The party that wins freedom for India should be also the party that will put into effect the entire program of post-war reconstruction. Only those who have won power can handle it properly. And what I am going to speak now is very, very relevant today. He continues, he says, only those who have won power can handle it properly. If other people are pitchforked into seats of power, which they were not responsible for capturing, they will lack that strength, confidence, and idealism which is indispensable for a revolutionary reconstruction. So all those who want to celebrate or venerate Subhash Chandra Bose, because he was a great INA general who fought the British, they don't want to read this because this is something which will go against the very ideological tenor which they represent. They don't represent what Subhash Chandra Bose imagined about India, the sort of India Subhash Chandra Bose wanted. You can have a statue of Subhash Chandra Bose, but that statue should speak. Now, you can't have a statue which has no voice. If you have a statue which about which people don't know what really that statue spoke when that statue was alive. Because for me, Subhash Chandra Bose or Bhagat Singh or Nehru or Gandhi, they are not dead because they are alive in their ideas. We actually kill them every day because we don't care to read what they left behind. We don't care to follow in our lives what they left behind. So we are actually killing them every day. Because anybody who has left behind a legacy which is a corpus of writings, corpus of ideas, corpus of values, such people don't die. We kill them because we don't care to read what they wrote. So this is something which Subhash Chandra Bose talked about. Then there is another thing which we hear all the time today, and I've only picked up few snippets from our freedom struggle about these 4-5 people, which are in circulation almost every other day. Another is Gandhi-Bose relationship. Because we all the time hear that there was serious antipathy between them. They didn't really agree with each other. Gandhi hated Subhash Chandra Bose, and today some such words are used which you can't even imagine. And before I come to exactly what Bose said about Gandhi in 1938, as late as 1938, and I say it quite often, that if you go by the reports about our history, about our freedom struggle particularly, the differences of leaders, the way they are talked about, it looks as if most of these people actually were not fighting the British. They were fighting each other. Because all that time, there's so much talked about their infighting as if they had nothing else to do. And we don't realize that they were all thinking people. They were not dumb demagogues. No, they were thinking people, and thinking people will always disagree. They never hated each other. They disagreed on many things, which they did. And if you read history, you will find the differences between Gandhi and Bose, between Nehru and Bose, and between Subhash Chandra Bose and others, between Maulana Azad and Sardar Patel, and so all of them. And I'm just naming 4 or 5 of them. But despite these differences, they loved each other. They respected each other. They were friends, and they remained friends till the end. And they remained committed to each other as human beings, as caring human beings, as Indians, all through their life, which is reflected in. Now, this is one example I want to give you, and there are lots of other examples we can quote. In the address, Haripura address itself, Netaji concluded his address by saying that India fervently hopes and prays that Mahatma Gandhi may be spared to our nation for many, many years to come. India cannot afford to lose him, and certainly not at this hour. We need him to keep our struggle free from bitterness and hatred. And this is important in today's context. We knew that Gandhi has a position, has a role to bring in love and empathy. And to fight hatred, you need Gandhi. What is more, we need for the cause of humanity. This is how Bose concluded. So, and this, I'm quoting this from 38 because 38 is a like people say, this may be his opinion in the earlier years. Bose changed later on. Or you can talk about similarly about other people. This is 1938. just a year and a half before Bose left India. So if he holds such a view about Gandhi, then what is this talk about antipathy between Gandhi and Nehru? You can talk about Gandhi and Bose. You can talk about the differences which were there, of course. But don't describe it as something which is Bose versus Gandhi, or some two enemies living together and not happy together. So that is not the case. There were disagreements, that's all. Now, if you come to, after this, we come to another important figure, which is talked about again and again. And I have worked in detail about him, and I can speak in all the time, but we have to briefly refer to him, because he is very important for us, because he is somebody who is left behind values, ideas, vision at an age where people can't even think coherently. When we talk about Bhagat Singh, we need to remember that he was 23 years and few months when he left us. His active intellectual and revolutionary life was 6 years. He was just 16 when he wrote his first very difficult piece in a magazine called Matwala, which used to come out from Calcutta, Hindi magazine. And that piece, and just imagine what was it about. A 17-year-old boy writes about universal brotherhood, Vishwa Prem, and in 6-7 pages, he elaborates what he imagines as a 17-year-old, what is Vishwa Prem, what is world brotherhood, the whole idea of all humans are one, human race is one. There cannot be antipathy between humans. Political boundaries actually mean nothing. And then he says, I imagine a world where there won't be a stranger. Now, today, where is this idea of Bhagat Singh in our lives today? Forget about the world. We create enemies within our own citizenry. We look for enemies within every other day, in the name of religion, in the name of caste, in the name of class, at all levels. So this is something which we have not cared to even understand, that these people, they were not just, it was not just martyrdom of Bhagat Singh, you should be celebrated. That is partial celebration of the man. We need to celebrate him holistically, celebrate his ideas. He is one of those revolutionaries who left behind huge corpus of writings, because we are talking on a press club platform, where he spent more than 4 or 5 years as a journalist, and in different papers. Like he wrote for Matwala, he wrote for Kirti from Amritsar, he wrote for Pratap from Kanpur, he wrote for Bilal in Delhi, and he wrote for so many other papers in Hindi and Urdu both. And he wrote on very, very serious subjects, very, very serious. And I often say, when I speak, I say, it's sad that we have to say that Bhagat Singh is relevant, his ideas are relevant. It is sad that his ideas are relevant today. They shouldn't have been relevant. Most of the issues which we should have resolved by now, issues of caste, issues of communalism, issues of poverty, these were the issues which were close to his heart. Because he, in his manifesto of Naujawan Bharat Sabha in 1926-27, he said that I imagine an India where there will be a rule of 98% Indians and not 2% elite. there will be a participation of 98% Indians, not 2% elite. And this he says in 1926-27. So these were the values which Bhagat Singh tried to inculcate, tried to leave behind, and we just don't bother about what actually he wrote. For us, he is just a shaheed who died on 23rd March 1931, who should be remembered once in a year, and then forgotten for the next 31st March, 23rd March. So this is what we are doing. So we are actually killing him every day, like we kill others. Bhagat Singh, we hail him as a brave heart, as I said, but not many care to actually understand his nationalist vision, the values he has left behind. Most of these icons conveniently reduced to being just raw nationalists and martyrs, with no reference to their ideas and politics, as I said. Bhagat Singh's nationalism now. Nationalism is another buzzword, which is like everybody is a nationalist.
Jingoism.
And,
Nationalism or jingoism?
Yeah, hyper nationalists. We were never such nationalists before. We were not even during freedom struggle. The sort of nationalism we espouse today. Our economic issues are laced with nationalism because we have to cover lots of our weaknesses, so nationalism comes in very handy. Similarly, if you talk about issues of caste, issues of communalism, everywhere nationalism comes in, and you easily dub anybody a nationalist who anti-national who doesn't conform to the so-called definition which we have followed during the past few years. And Bhagat Singh was very far away from that, and this is something which we don't care to understand. His nationalism was deeply rooted in his sharp critique of the caste system, and I'm not actually, these are all his own writings. Untouchability and communalism. All three are serious threats even now. That's why he is relevant even now, unfortunately. His azadi was not limited to expelling of the British. Instead, he desired azadi from poverty, azadi from untouchability, azadi from communal strife, and azadi from any other discrimination and exploitation. This is a nationalism he perceived. Just 20 days before his martyrdom on 3rd March 1931, Bhagat Singh sent out an explicit message to the youth saying, and I quote him, "The struggle in India would continue so long as a handful of exploiters go on exploiting the labor of the common people for their own ends. It matters little whether these exploiters are purely British capitalists or British and Indians in alliance or even purely Indians." So this makes Bhagat Singh more relevant. Like lots of people tell me that Bhagat Singh was actually fighting against the British. So why should that same battle continue now? Why should his ideas be relevant? No, he himself writes in 1931 that I am not concerned about the fight against the British. No, I am concerned about inequality, about exploitation, and that should end. If that continues, even if British goes, then the battle has to continue. So for him, the ideas he stood for are relevant now as they were there during those times. One of the most iconic essays he wrote, and which you must have heard, and I'm sure you know about that, is called "Why I'm an Atheist." Now, this essay is seen as some sort of a harangue against God, as the title suggests, which it was certainly. It was against God, the existence of God, because that is where he declares himself an atheist. Now, not many people know that this essay was not just against the existence of God. It talked about lots of things which we are facing in our lives today. That's why I tried to raise it. He talks about gender equality. He talks about scientific temper. He talks about critiquing tradition. He said we should not accept anything which comes from the past. Anything from the past need to have a question mark. We just can't go and follow anything which we have inherited from our tradition. There are lots of things which we need to question, which we need to reject, which we need to forget. Everything is not supposed to be followed in our lives forever. So anybody who follows this tradition blindly is a reactionary. There's the word he uses. He's a reactionary. And he's unthinking individual. He has no mind of his own. Because if he doesn't use it, then that mind actually doesn't exist. So you need to use your brains to understand what you have inherited and make your own opinion about it. Then another thing which is relevant for today's India is about, and he's talking about Mahatma Gandhi in 1931. He says, we see today large number of people following our great leader without understanding exactly what he stands for. Then I'm not saying you don't follow him, but at least don't follow him blindly. Try to understand what he speaks, what he writes. Read it, engage with it, have a dialogue with Gandhi through his writings. If you understand him and see that what he says actually is right and what is not wrong, then I have no issues. And he uses the word bhakt. And bhakt is quite a well-known word today in our lives. He said, andhbhakti of anybody is questionable. And I don't espouse anybody's cause, whosoever he or she is, who believes that anybody, a great leader, should be followed without question. So these are things which Bhagat Singh left behind. And there are lots of other things we can talk about. Then, as a journalist, and I would like to speak about that part because we are all speaking on a platform of journalists, and Bhagat Singh, as a journalist, wrote some very, very seminal essays, short essays, when he was invited by Sohan Singh Josh, who was a leader of Workers and Peasants Party, Kirti Kisan Party in Amritsar. He used to bring out a magazine called Kirti, and he asked Bhagat Singh to come and be part of the editorial board of this magazine, which he agreed. So he came from Lahore to Amritsar. He stayed there for a year or less than a year. The issues of May, June, July, August, he wrote sometimes 2 pieces an issue. And what were the issues? Yeah. Many of these issues were, which are relevant for today's India, like religion and politics, students and politics. And I wrote somewhere during this whole crisis in JNU, etc., when student politics issue, and people advised that students are supposed to study in university campuses, they have nothing to do with politics. And there is an example of Bhagat Singh as a young man who spoke about very seriously about political issues, and as I said, his ideas were not relevant only for those times, as he himself has pointed out several times that he will continue to battle the fight even if the British leave. So he wrote against communalism and its solutions, and he wrote on untouchability. So all these issues are of very contemporary concerns. Like when he writes about communalism, he says in today's India, most of the political leaders are intellectually bankrupt. These are his words. And he's writing about the leaders who were tall leaders, who were not like pygmies of today. And he's talking about people like Sardar Patel, Madan Mohan Malviya, Maulana Azad, Nehru, Gandhi, and he's calling them intellectually bankrupt. And he says they are intellectually bankrupt because they have no idea how nation need to be built. They are dividing the country. They are talking of communalism. They have joined communal platforms, and he's referring to Lajpat Rai because he joined Hindu Mahasabha. And he said these people are a disappointment. And they have been joined by the press. Now, the press today is very different. Bhagat Singh's press in those times was just print media. And that was also very limited. And there was radio was very limited. Television was not there at all. There was no social media. So he's talking about the print media, the newspapers. He said most of the newspapers' responsibility actually is to create a composite nationalism. These are his words. The responsibility of the press is to build composite nationalism because we are fighting against the British. Now, on the contrary, what they are doing, they give provocative headlines to divide us. They don't raise issues which are issues concerning the poor or the labor or the working class or people without looking at them as Hindus and Muslims. So the press has behaved very irresponsibly. So these are his words. We are having a press which is irresponsible. Now, Bhagat Singh found press irresponsible in 1928. Now you can imagine what we can talk about the press today. Not all, but most of them. So this is something, as a journalist, Bhagat Singh tried to speak or write about, talk about, and he did that at the age of 20, 21, 22. By 22 he was behind bars, 21 and a half. And he kept writing in the prison. Also, actually, he wrote most serious things in prison, including his prison diary and his Why Man a Feast. And the last letter he wrote to the youth of Punjab. So these are things which we have inherited from our freedom struggle, from our icons of our freedom struggle, which we have almost forgotten. We have not forgotten, we have not even cared to remember them, because we don't need them. We need Bhagat Singh as a shaheed, as a martyr, because it catches people's eyes. You can ask for votes in his name, whether you do that in Punjab or you do that all over India. So that is a very convenient tool. And I spoke in one of these Delhi government's celebrations of Bhagat Singh's birthday on 28th September. They organized a meeting inside the secretariat, Delhi secretariat, inviting 70, 80 people, including students. And they asked me to speak. So I told the minister who was sitting there, I said, you have this photo in all your offices, because this photo will not do anything. It won't serve any purpose. You have photo of Bhagat Singh, you have photo of Ambedkar. But both of them actually can speak. They can speak through their writings. Both of them are prolific in their ideas. Where are those ideas in your policy making? The governance should reflect the ideas of Bhagat Singh and Ambedkar both, which unfortunately we don't find anywhere. So this is something which we do very conveniently, and we find it very convenient to use them, all these icons, most of the time. Now, when another icon which is talked about very frequently, very often, is Ambedkar. Now, Ambedkar is again, and I thought we should talk about Ambedkar through Ambedkar's own words, because that is more important. And it is important, particularly today when it's a Constitution Day. he actually did not write much on issues like nationalism. He was somebody who avoided writing on nationalism. He wrote on nationalism in 1940, as late as 40, when he wrote a book on Pakistan, the idea of Pakistan. At that moment, he gets into this idea of engaging with this issue of nationalism. So all those who talk of Hindu Rashtra, Hindu nation today, and vouch for Ambedkar, and this is important, I thought this is relevant in today's India, vouch for Ambedkar in the same breath, need to remember these two lines of his. He wrote, if Hindu Raj does become a fact, it will, no doubt, be the greatest calamity for this country. Hindu Raj must be prevented at any cost. And these are his words. And he is writing this as late as 1940. He didn't write it early. Baba Saheb Ambedkar made these observations in the midst of the vicious communal campaigns of the Hindu Mahasabha and the Muslim League. They were all, both of them, both the communal forces. Like one Muslim League ended up dividing the country, and forces like Hindu Mahasabha ended up weakening nationalism. That was their idea, because they were not looking for a nation like Muslim League. Muslim League was using two-nation theory to create a country in the name of religion, which they succeeded ultimately. He further explained his nationalist vision and the sort of India he envisaged in one of his speeches in the Bombay Assembly. He says, and I quote, I do not believe there is any place in this country for any particular culture, whether it is a Hindu culture, or a Mohammedan culture, or a Canaries culture, or a Gujarati culture. The common goal is the building up of the feeling that we are all Indians. I do not like what some people say, that we are Indians first and Hindus afterwards, or Muslims afterwards. I want all people to be Indians first, Indians last, and nothing else but Indians. So this is what Ambedkar stood for, and this is something which we don't even care to understand. We talk about Ambedkar in terms of caste. Of course, he talked about caste. That was his ultimate battle. But he talked about such issues as well, and as strongly as he talked about caste and caste discrimination, untouchability. When we talk of nationalism and culture today, we should pause to understand what our founding fathers meant by both. The unbridled nationalism being flaunted today may do more harm than good to the idea of an inclusive and peaceful India. Ambedkar categorically explained that nationalism, and I'm talking about nationalism because nationalism is another value which we have subverted, the value which we inherited from our freedom struggle. Nationalism which was composite, which was inclusive, which was indivisible, all that we have forgotten. He explained that nationalism is a double-edged feeling, because it is at once a feeling of fellowship for one's own kith and kin, and an anti-fellowship feeling for those who are not one's own kith and kin. He said, it is a feeling of consciousness of kind, which on the one hand binds together those who have it so strongly that it overrides all differences arising out of economic conflicts or social gradations, and on the other hand severs them from those who are not of their kind. It is a longing not to belong to any other group. This is the essence of what is called a nationality and national feeling. So this is how Ambedkar tried to define. He didn't write much, but this is what he wrote in the end about nationalism and about nationality. Ambedkar actually cautioned us years ago when he said, if nationalism means the worship, and this is important in today's India, today's context, if nationalism means the worship of the ancient past, the discarding of everything that is not local in origin and color, then Labour, and Labour he is using about his Labour Party which he formed in Bombay in 1940. And he is using it after founding this party again and again. He is talking about when he's talking about labor, he's talking about his Labour Party. The discarding of everything that is not local in origin and color, then Labour cannot accept nationalism as its creed. Labour cannot allow the living faith of the dead. Labour cannot allow the living faith of the dead to become the dead faith of the living. For him, nationalism was just a means to an end, and not an end in itself. He never perceived it as a sacred creed, as some of us do today. So this is how Ambedkar tried to understand nationalism, tried to understand identity, tried to understand the position of religion in our lives. And most of these issues are far away from us. We never care to talk about. We talk about Ambedkar again and again. We talk about Bhagat Singh, we talk about Bose. But where are these ideas which they stood for? Because legacy or values, they are not abstract. They come from individuals. What we have inherited from freedom struggle, we have inherited from the ideas which people espoused in those times. Now they defined them. And they became our inheritance, which we have not cared to take forward. This is a challenge before us. And unfortunately, most of us, many of us, either we have no time or we don't care. Because if you talk to, like when I go to some schools to speak, people, the parents over there or the teachers, they raise a question that Bhagat Singh is not taught, or Subhash Chandra Bose is not taught in schools, the syllabus, the schools and even in colleges. I said, you can't, there are lots of things which we need to read on our own. Like school syllabus will not cover the whole of freedom struggle, the whole of history. That's not possible. There are lots of things which we can do outside the syllabus. We can cultivate the reading habits by reading whatever these people wrote or left behind. There are lots of things available which we can go through, but we don't bother to even do that. Lastly, I will spend a few minutes on Maulana Azad and India. Maulana Azad was somebody who, as you know by the name, and Maulana, he was a man of religion, he was a scholar of Islam. His early years were spent in writing and talking about Islam. He was somebody who actually missed the phase of youth, because Sarojini Naidu once made a comment that Maulana was 55 years old when he was born, and which was taken seriously by lots of people. He said, yeah, exactly, because we have never seen him speaking like a young man. He always spoke as a very serious scholar, even when he was a 15-year-old youth. So he finished his education. He never went to any school, any college, university. He was educated at home, self-taught. He was an autodidact who taught himself. And his father taught him, then he himself taught himself lots of things. And what he inherited and what he left behind for us, and this is what I would like to emphasize, and because there is no time to talk about him in detail, is that he, despite being a man who was committed to a particular religion in his early years, began his paper in 1912, Al-Hilal, from Calcutta. Most of the issues were concerned, and he had not joined Congress party, he was not part of freedom struggle till then, but he was a pan-Islamist, anti-imperialist, who was writing about imperialism all over the Islamic world, including India, and preparing the people to fight against imperialist forces. He became a challenge to the British, and in the British files, in archives, there is a file which says that Maulana Abul Kalam Azad is one of the most dangerous human beings, like dangerous for the British. So he became a dangerous human being for the British before he joined the Congress party. So that he did as a journalist. And this is again very important for us. As a journalist, through his writings, he became a challenge for the British Empire. And so he was exiled for 3 years to Ranchi. He comes out in 1920 and meets Gandhi for the first time in January 1920. Joins the Congress party. Now after that, his life was spent, which is important for us, spent in articulating a composite nationalism, indivisible nationalism. He questions Muslim League, the whole idea of dividing the country in the name of religion. He said, go back to the Prophet Muhammad and see how he formed the first Islamic nation in Medina. He created an Islamic nation in 7th century, including Jews and Muslims together. So this was a composite nationality to create a nation, the first Islamic nation. So if Prophet could do this, why can't we create a nation including Hindus and Muslims in this country? So this was a mission which he took forward all his life, and Muslim League and Jinnah particularly identified him as a showboy of the Congress. Used very pejorative and very abusive language against Maulana Azad, and we never see him responding. Always remained civil in his behavior. Never responded to any of Jinnah's diatribes. But he remained committed to the idea of indivisible India, one nation, against partition, against for togetherness. And this is something which Jinnah tried to show, that Maulana Azad was actually showboy. All other Muslims were Muslim League, which is untrue, which is, as I explained in one of the chapters in my book, which is coming soon, that Maulana Azad was supported by a large number of people, which we don't care to understand. And that is the reason why in today's India, if you go to Uttar Pradesh, you see the demography. Uttar Pradesh, districts from Saharanpur to Moradabad, Rampur, Bijnor, Meerut, Muzaffarnagar, all these districts have today 26% Muslim population. Total Muslim population is 19%, but these districts have 26%. And these districts were right next to Punjab, which was facing extreme violence, from where people were running away. And when I tried to explore it further, I found that this area was under the influence of Deoband Seminary, Darul Uloom, Maulana Hussain Ahmad Madani, who was with Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, who stood for United India. Most of the Pasmada Muslims whom we talk about these days, hear about, those Pasmada Muslims were not part of the Muslim League. Majority of them stood with Maulana Azad and the seminary. And I have tried it several times, and Jakpal actually has worked on UP, and he may support me on this. That I have checked with lots of my Ansari friends in Meerut. None of them, I think 20 families I have seen, none of them have their relatives across the border. Those families were not divided. And you will not find a single Sayyid family which is not divided, including my own. So there is a section which did not believe in the rhetoric of the Muslim League that India should be divided in the name of religion, because they didn't find it as a threat. Muslim League put together people who were Zameedars, landlords, professional classes. They look for a brighter future in a new country, jobs and businesses, etc. People who had nothing here didn't have much to look forward to. So why should they be displaced? So they decided against it. This is something which Maulana did. So Maulana didn't actually fail. He succeeded in convincing a large number of Muslims to stay back and declare India as their homeland, which they did. So this is something which we need to understand. These are the values which we inherited from these people. So in this short time, I think this is enough which we can ponder about, talk about, think about, and maybe we are all very mature some scholars and some thinking people who can go back to these people's writings and try to understand what they actually left behind for us, which we don't care to read or think of. Thank you.
Thank you, Irfan. It's a very interesting and illuminating lecture you've given. I just, before we open it to the house,
I'm getting out.
You're-
because I've attended
Okay, you're most welcome.
lecture by the president of the
So,
Vice President.
so that's okay. So, the point I just want to flag is that, you mentioned this in one of your pieces which you had written about the survey, short survey which was done by Shobhan Saxena, on these thousands of Shishu Mandirs which have been teaching history as a project and generating hate, and it has been happening for decades. And Shobhan talks of in his survey that he began by saying that such a hate project gives hooligans a sense of purpose and in place what he believes to be the larger scheme of things. Now, how do you think we should, how this can be tackled? I mean, I know this is a very tough question, but how do you perceive this?
Can I say something?
Just one second, please.
Because I'm
One
leaving.
second.
No, this is something very serious, what you are saying about what Shishu Mandirs have been teaching. They have been teaching for decades. And I've been saying this very
I promise
often.
to
Nobody
see.
has cared to counter
What is
this
this talking and
this
talking?
campaign of education by setting up alternative institutions where you can teach something which counters what is being taught, which has not happened. Unfortunately, in places where Congress claims to be in power, if you have such serious issues with these Shishu Mandirs, why don't you counter them? Establish counter schools and teach them something otherwise, something which is more harmonious, which talks about togetherness. But we haven't done it, so you just can't crib. And I am part of it. We critique what they teach, but we have no alternative. We have not created an alternative to question that. That is unfortunate. Should have been done.
So we can open, you want to have a
I
question?
want to leave. because
Yeah, that's okay, yeah. There are other things, important things waiting.
I know you are a
You
very
can
important
leave
person.
without asking the question.
We all know.
Yeah.
How important you
Yeah,
are.
let's, yeah, please, go ahead.
Look, I was a member of the IPS from 1963 to 1997. I read Gandhi for the first time after I joined IB and I became a Marxist. After reading Nambudripad. Nambudripad describes Gandhi as the far-sighted leader of the Indian bourgeoisie. At that time, 1955, so you have to be very detached. In 1979, I was invited by the United Nations to make a presentation of minority rights in the criminal justice system in India. I went there and made a presentation, 4 days presentation, different scholars from all over India. I was the only Indian invited. I made a presentation on 4 different subjects on minority rights. I did not accept the Indian Constitution. I kind of criticized the Indian Constitution, but I did not completely reject it. I made a presentation, and the paper is with you. I have sent
Mani,
you.
what is the point you are
No,
making?
the point I'm making is we have to read more deeply about the Indian Constitution, which I don't think, I'm not getting it from Irfan's presentation. Read Achin Vanayak. Have you read Achin Vanayak's
No,
essay on
let's
Constitution?
not get into
Please
that.
read that,
Yeah.
because I'm not confused. I'm very clear about the Constitution of India. It is total failure. It's a complete failure.
Okay.
You know what Bhagat Singh asked Gandhi? How did Ram bring Sita back? He used violence. This is the point made by Bhagat Singh himself. Bhagat Singh was not confused. There was a very young man of 20 years, 25 years old. So we have to read Bhagat Singh also very, very carefully. And Ambedkar's great book, Annihilation of Past in India. He was not allowed to make a presentation in
Lahore.
yeah. So he made a presentation, it was published. It's a fantastic book. All of us should read it. I have read it because although I'm a Hindu Brahmin, I was born a
Now you can
Brahmin.
go. You are
I have read Ambedkar and I see 100% I agree with
The
Ambedkar.
point taken, okay.
Yeah,
Fine.
you have to read Ambedkar and all the people.
Would you like to comment?
No.
Okay.
Can I make a point?
Yeah, please.
I was hoping that you will also include Nehru in what you're saying. The reason for that is there are a number of people who are being vilified as much.
So why Nehru was part of my this thing.
Yeah, you
Because
did mention
because short of
him, but
time,
you
I
did not. Yeah, okay.
I just
So what I'm trying to say is that just as they are trying to see some aspects of Subhash Chandra Bose and grab it as if it is their idea also. Similarly, like you spoke on our platform last year, Irfan, you talked about Nehru and nationalism. And at that point in time, it became very clear what his nationalism was. That is the one thing which is under most serious challenge because that is being accepted. My major point is in other cases that they are being vilified or whatever. But in this case, everybody agrees, this is not how it should have been. So as Prime Minister, I think that's an important aspect we covered.
Sure, sure.
No,
Can you press the key? Press the key, please. You want to say?
No, I'm sorry, I wanted to,
No, you have to
talk
press
to
the
that
key.
gentleman
Key
walked
dabao.
out. I've got nothing to say to what Irfan has said, but that gentleman has given me a very revolutionary period from his speech. I should follow him, that's all I'm saying.
Anybody else?
There's some.
Yeah, please. Please pick the mic. Okay. Yeah.
I was born after partition and I agree, nobody in school tells you anything about any of the freedom fighters. So would Mr. Irfan like to put it out online? Why don't you make modules of, expanding on what you said and make modules like courses which people can access? That would be very useful.
See, I just before election, I was talking to my old friend Dinesh, and he just told me, why have you stopped your... I began this 10-minute video on history, on different questions of history. And so I did about 14 of them, on different issues. And then, as it happens, I don't blame anybody, I blame myself. I got lost in other things, and those videos, my own son keeps saying me that why don't you record it for 10 minutes and do it, some issue, it should be done. Because there is something which, those videos which I did had very good response. And I used to get lots of comments and all that, and people used to talk about it, whoever accessed it. So I did something in some Hindi, some English, alternatively. So I agree, that should be done.
No, the other thing, Irfan, which you talked about was this cherry picking.
Yeah.
You pick on